Next, let's show you the latest images we have today from the Gaza Strip, where more Palestinians are fleeing Rafah as Israeli forces pound the city. Over 1 million people had been sheltering in Rafah, but now some 600,000 of them are thought to have moved again. Now, some have arrived in the Massawi camp. That's where Israel is encouraging Palestinians to head to, despite a lack of food, medicine and shelter. Palestinians there, and indeed across Gaza, say nowhere in the enclave is safe.
ما بدنا نرجع في الشارع نحط خيمة في الشارع كمان هو ضل غزة ما ضلش غزة غزة دمرت على بكرة أبيها ما ضل بيت نرجع له
بدهم مش حدا بدهم يشوفوا حدا في الشوارع فعليا يعني فعليا بدهم يدمرونا بدهم يدمروا كل قدراتنا حتى المشي يا الله بدهم شيء أنا نمشي يعني
وهي الحمد لله اليوم ابني وجوزي الحمد لله ابني لسه قمر يمه قمر والله ناهض قمر يضوي البيت اللي معدمه له شهر والله عريس راح لعروسته الحمد لله.
Well, to talk a bit more then about what is happening in Gaza, I'm very pleased now to welcome to the programme Louise Wateridge. She's a spokesperson for the UN agency for the Palestinians, UNRWA. She herself was in Gaza for 3 weeks. She left just 2 days ago. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us on France 24. First of all, let's talk about Rafah, that city in the south of Gaza that Israel has said for a long time it plans to attack. We understand that incursion has now got underway. You were in Rafah. Tell us, first of all, what you witnessed there.
I mean, the transformation of Rafah over the last 3 weeks has been unbelievable. When I arrived in Rafah, the makeshift shelters were almost tent to tent. There was not a lot of space between these shelters. People were crammed in. This is the city that used to have around 250,000 people, and there were around 1.4 million people sheltering there. In the space of about 6 days, Rafah emptied. It was devastating to see how these people fled in absolute fear and terror, especially as the bombardment picked up through the night. There was certainly one night that the bombardment was increased so much. The drones above, you had Navy shelling from the sea, and then also incursions coming nearer from the east of Rafah. And that night was really a deciding point for a lot of people. The whole next day, anyone and everyone who could move was moving. And as I left Rafah, these areas that would fill with families just days before, the only thing left was rubbish lying around and packs of dogs going through this rubbish trying to find any scraps of food to eat. So in the space of 7 days, this area just completely transformed and was left very, very eerie.
Yeah, such a bleak picture you paint there of what you witnessed in Rafah. As I mentioned, Israel has been calling on Palestinians there to go to this place called Massawi. It's not a city. It's a pretty small strip of land. Israel says that's the safest place for them to go now. What do you make of that?
There's nowhere safe. There's absolutely nowhere safe. My colleague, Jamal, just a few days ago, he was one of many people and many families who had to flee Rafah for this so-called safety, and he was killed. He was killed in an Israeli strike in Deir al-Balah. This is the reality that people in Gaza are facing. They are being forced to leave multiple times. They are being told there is safety somewhere else. There is not. There is no safety. People are dying. People are being killed. People are starving. People are in absolute fear and terror. It has not stopped. 7 months. Everyone you speak to is exhausted. They are wearing this exhaustion on their face. They are so tired of this life that they are living. It's not a life. It is a survival, and it is not acceptable that people are experiencing this and surviving through this suffering.
As you say, it is a question then for those Palestinians trapped of trying to survive now amid the bombardments, but also, as you say, because food in Gaza is so limited now. Tell us a bit about what UNRWA is able to do in terms of getting food, water, and medicine to people, because we've been reporting that the border with Rafah has been shut, and obviously there have been significant restrictions by Israel on your own agency, on UNRWA.
UNRWA continues to do everything possible. We're working very closely with partners like WFP, the World Food Programme, to do anything and everything we can to safely distribute food to people. This is in the north of the Gaza Strip and the south. But as you say, and as the world is very aware, with the crossings in the south of the Gaza Strip not functioning, this makes it incredibly difficult. This also comes on the back of 7 months, 7 whole months of unsustained aid delivery. It's not the case that the crossing is closed now for a week and that's an issue. It's never been enough aid. There has never been enough food. So yes, now when you have the crossing closed 1 day, 2 days, 2 weeks, it is a huge problem. Of course, it's a huge problem. People have not eaten. They've not had enough sustained food for the duration of this war. Right now, not only people fleeing for their lives again in terms of forced displacement, they are also very aware that this border crossing is closed, food is limited, and that creates even more panic, more fear for people. If we are to get any limited aid in, it's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. The humanitarian agencies are doing everything they can, but there's very limited fuel as well. They're working on an hour-by-hour basis. How is it possible to sustain critical food and life-saving water and supplies and medicine to an entire 2 million population when you can't even plan the next day of your operations? It's just unbelievable.
And I'm interested, in perhaps what struck you personally most about this trip. You were in Gaza for 3 weeks. That is, really quite a long time, given, the immense dangers of being in Gaza, the immense humanitarian crisis as well. You travel to different parts of the Gaza Strip. Tell us, perhaps just personally, what stayed with you?
The people. I've worked in the Gaza Strip for 4 years now. I know some friends and colleagues very well. The people always stay with me at the Gaza Strip. People in Gaza are so warm and welcoming and kind. And I was very surprised that given everything that these people have been through over the last 7 months, they still carried this warmth, but it's just with a real tone of sadness. Because how are they still living in this life? How are they still surviving in these conditions? Despite this survival and persevering, they still have this warmth and kindness. And I don't think anyone would ever experience anything like it. These people have been through so much, not just the last 7 months, but in their lives. Before this war, they were living under blockade. It's never been easy, but certainly the last few weeks, there was a huge shift in when I arrived in Rafah to when I left, because this displacement is really, for a lot of people, it's the last straw. They don't know what else to do. They don't know where else to go. And it's not even the fear and the terror, it's the future uncertainty. How do you just stay alive day by day for your children? A lot of the colleagues were telling me, I have a 1-year-old daughter, I have a 5-year-old son. I just am staying alive for them. I want them to at some point have a future. That is so bleak. It's such a bleak reality that these people are living in.
Absolutely. And in terms of the UNRWA's role now, you mentioned that you are still operating with partners inside of the Gaza Strip. To get that aid into the enclave, though, where's the block? Because Israel is blaming Egypt, Egypt is blaming Israel. From your end, from the perspective of a humanitarian, where does the pressure now need to be put to bring in that food, to bring in that medicine?
There has never been sustained access and sustained humanitarian supplies entering the Gaza Strip. Not in the north, not in the south, not ever, for 7 months. The pressure needs to be on these border crossings opening on a regular basis with a sustainable amount of aid coming in. Before the war, there were around 500 trucks a day. This was humanitarian and commercial supplies. We have not seen anything close to that. Nothing close to that. And now we are in the complete middle of a war. It is not acceptable that there is not enough aid coming in. There are so many different efforts. I can see on the screen now, there is, the dropping from the air, this aid. That is the absolute last resort. You have UNRWA on the ground, you have World Food Programme, they are working together, the United Nations are there, there is a huge humanitarian presence of staff ready to provide aid where it's needed, but we do not have the access. How can people do their jobs if they don't have the access and they don't have the aid coming in? It's that simple. Open the crossings, let the aid in, let the humanitarians do their jobs, and this will not continue. People will not starve.
The United States says that they have now completed the pier that they want to build just off the Gaza Strip in the waters off Gaza to bring food and supplies in that way. What do you make of that?
The easiest way to bring in any aid to the Gaza Strip is through the land crossings, through trucks, through the people on the ground, and through the systems and mechanisms that we have in place. It's that simple. That is the way the aid needs to be delivered to people. It goes straight from the crossings to the people in the shelters, to the people to be distributed. It's the simplest, it's the easiest way, and that is where the pressure needs to be.
Louise Wateridge talking to us from UNRWA. It's been really interesting to get your perspective. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us today.
Thank you.